Welcome back to our Lincoln Bishop online conference series. Today we have another very important topic relating to education. Today's focus will take us from classroom to boardroom, with the aim of empowering school leaders to build stronger and more purposeful relationships with employers. To explore this, you'll notice we're trying out a new exciting format today. We'll have 2 keynote speakers, followed by a panel discussion. We'll also be sharing with you some key highlights from throughout the day. Our first keynote speaker of the day, he'll be offering a 15-minute national context keynote, setting out the current picture of careers, education and employment engagement across the country. Our second key speaker of the day, he'll be sharing a market mindset for schools, a case study from South Charnwood High School, with practical strategies for developing strong, purposeful relationships with local businesses. Finally, for our panel discussion, John and Dan will be joined by Steve Penny, Katrina Pierce and Mark Jarvis, each bringing valuable insights from their work across the region.
I speak at these kind of events probably once a week across the country, and I do say at every event that I go to how pleased I am to be in whichever city or area of the country. But today is particularly special for me because it's local. So unlike last week when I was getting up at 4 o'clock to get to Exeter, coming to Lincoln is a pleasure because I was able to get up at a nice time of the morning this morning. I just live down in Grantham and know the area very well. So it is genuinely great to be here today. And I'm going to sort of just start with the bigger picture in terms of what are we ultimately trying to tackle, what are we trying to achieve. And I think in terms of what's happened, where I would start is just that broader picture of the situation across the country and some of the challenges I think we face as a country, but also young people particularly face themselves in terms of I think most of us in the room will be aware of the rising sort of spectrum of youth unemployment as an issue that we're facing as a country, the impact of that on productivity across the country as well. This kind of growing sense I know the Department for Education and government are particularly concerned about in terms of special needs and how that kind of growth is, how we ensure that young people who have additional needs of some kind, their needs are being met and how we can support them into the best possible outcomes that they can achieve. And then there's that broader sense of economic change as well. It's the disruption that not just AI is causing, but other forces as well in terms of global events and how that is all contributing to quite an uncertain landscape and quite an unsettling one, particularly for young people. So when I speak to young people about AI, they absolutely hate it. They absolutely hate it because it's being talked about so much in terms of the disruption it's going to cause for them in the future without any sort of solutions to that. So I think there's a lot going on is what I'm trying to sort of say. There's a lot going on for the economy. There's a lot going on for educators, but there's a lot going on for young people as well. And it's too easy, in my view, for us to think about young people as not being ready, not being prepared, not having the skills needed. That is, the sort of the general sort of comments that you can hear in the media and sometimes from some employers are too easy for us to kind of rest on. What are we doing to support those young people through this challenging landscape is sort of my starting position. And I think we can base that on the fact that there's quite a lot has happened over what has now been a decade. And talking to one of the later speakers, Dan, today, talking about his work as a volunteer, and I'm sure you've got many other volunteers in the room today that have been enterprise advisors for some time. The sense of continuity that we've had now for the last decade is quite rare in education policy. I had one of the slides that I haven't used today, but I showed the number of education secretaries that we've had over that time, those last 10 years, that the Gatsby benchmarks have been around, that the Careers and Enterprise Company have been around, that this type of work has been existed. And it was more than your average football club manager, tenure. So that kind of inconsistency is rife within public policy. But I think one of the strengths of careers work over the last decade has been an element of consistency. And the three images that this slide represents show that the basis, the pillars of that consistency. So we've had the Gatsby benchmarks, which I'm sure everyone, or most people in the room are aware of. They're kind of a very clear view of 8 things that every school and college should be aiming to do to deliver excellent careers guidance. And that was based on international research, thoroughly evidenced, and have now been revised 10 years on in terms of going again. But that's been the basis for that kind of consistency across schools and colleges. We've had the growth and development of careers leaders, and I'm talking to a room where there are careers leaders in the room, but that central point within every institution, really driving careers work and careers education in those institutions, but building on the Gatsby benchmarks. And then we've had the presence in every part of England where there's a careers hub. Unfortunately, this time I've included the right logo, and sometimes I've forgotten to update it and it's been the wrong logo. But Greater Lincolnshire Careers Hub, colleagues in the room from Greater Lincolnshire Careers Hub are here today. They are the fulcrum in connecting business and education. They're the fulcrum for guiding and supporting employers and educators to make this reality. And we've had those now in place for the last few years, and their work continues to expand and develop. So those have been the pillars, if you like, for this point of consistency. And that's seen progress, that has seen undoubted progress in terms of the work that's taken place. And this graph shows 2 things. The red line shows the number of schools and colleges. When I talk about schools, it's all kinds of schools, special schools, alternative provision, every type of school that's involved in the state sector. So the growth of the number of schools across and colleges across the country that have become engaged in this work, that are now reporting voluntarily on their Gatsby benchmarks. And then the blue bars underneath them represent, again, over the last 9 years, how those Gatsby benchmarks have increased. And that represents an increased level of activity across the country. And we know that when activity increases, young people feel more confident and more aware of the routes that they can take for their futures. So that's the progress. That's looking back. That's looking back over the last 9 or 10 years. I really want us to now think about what's happening now. And there's 2 key priorities that the Careers Hub is currently working on, and we are working on as a national body for careers education across the country. One of them is the revised Gatsby benchmarks that I spoke about. That lifts the bar in terms of the quality, and it presents a new challenge for schools and colleges to engage in terms of thinking even more deeply about how they can make a difference for every student and learner within their institution. The other major priority is taking what was a manifesto commitment when Labour were in opposition to now being government policy around work experience. So they had this manifesto commitment before they came into power, which was all about increasing the amount of work experience, going back to the entitlement, if you like, of 2 weeks of work experience, almost presenting it initially as a fortnight, a block placement. And we've been working hard with them and with the Department for Education to think more creatively about that, to think about how work experience can go beyond where it used to be. So not just resting on an ambition that was based on something that, let's be honest, didn't always work for every student anyway in the past. I had a fairly average experience when I did it 40 years ago. So yeah, it didn't work. It didn't work perfectly back in the day. So let's not go back to what, to what didn't work. Let's think about something that can work, not only for schools, but also for businesses, but fundamentally for young people. And that means thinking about in more depth about what the outcomes are for those students, thinking about how it works across a number of businesses, how it gives young people a broader exposure to both sectors and to employers and ultimately to jobs, and how that progresses throughout their time in education. And so there's a short video just explains a little bit more about why we're thinking about that in such depth. And obviously we're going to talk about it later on today as well.
Okay, deep breath. Big day. Do I look smart or like I borrowed my mum's shoes? To answer that. Okay, so me. I'm 15. I've not got any connections, no uncle sat in some big office, no one's giving me a leg up. Just this feeling like I want to make something of myself. I want to see what I could do and who I could be. My teacher's always bigging me up, reckons I got talent, gets proper giddy talking about careers, destinations, and well, part of me wants to believe it. I really do, but I can't see it. I can't picture myself in those places. Thing is, loads of us, we've got dreams bigger than our postcodes, bigger than this box we've been shoved in. But now they're talking about giving every young person 10 days worth of work experience, proper chances to see and try stuff. That's massive. Because most of us, we don't even know what's out there. All we see is closed doors, jobs that look like they're for someone else, but not us. And honestly, work experience, no one ever tells you what to say. Like, do I shake hands or high five? Feel like I'd high five accidentally and then just like die. So yeah, this guarantee, it can't just be words on paper, a boring office tour, or a pretend job where you're basically just like furniture at the corner. Nah, it's gotta be real. Proper chance to try loads of different things. Real stuff that makes you think, I belong here. I could do this, you know, I might even be brilliant at this. But let's be honest, this guarantee won't be easy. I mean, it's dead easy to just let it all fail. All talk, no action. But if that happens, it's people like me who miss out and we don't get another shot. So that's why I'm asking you. Let's make it real. Make it count. And not just for the lucky few, but for all of us. This is a once in a generation chance. Get this right, and you don't just change my future, you change the story for a whole generation. So please, let's make it work.
Really powerful sense of what we're aiming to achieve. It's kind of concept of modern work experience, thinking about it in a progressive way, starting earlier in Key Stage 3 in years 7, 8, 9, giving a broad range of could be quite shallow experiences, but that initial exposure to a broad range of sectors to motivate and interest young people. And then as they move through into Key Stage 4, thinking about more in-depth exposure to different sectors, different work, different employers is exactly how we're starting to work on that. And the pilots that have been undertaken, including locally, have been instrumental in shaping what that looks like and how we now start to roll that out across the rest of the country. It offers new opportunities for employers. It presents different opportunities to embed within the curriculum for schools. And ultimately, it will make a greater difference to young people. And that's a key focus over the next few years. Just finally thinking about what needs to happen next. It would be good, in my view, if ultimately, and this is me playing with ChatGPT very unsuccessfully, it would be good in my view if in the future, as we look forward, thinking about how we build on those experiences that young people have, for them to be able to present and reflect on that experience in a way that they can to employers, and thinking about how they do that digitally, how they think about and reflect on the skills, the experience, the development that they've undertaken both in school but ultimately out of school as well through a broad range of enrichment experiences is where I would like us as a collective movement to go in the years to come, so that young people can be confident, articulate, and ultimately successful in presenting themselves to their employers of the future. So thank you for listening this morning. I hope that's given a good sense of where we want to go in the future, but also reflecting on where we have got to already today. Thank you.
Yes, I'm here to share my experience. I've come from Leicestershire, and we're talking about the reasons why. I'm driving over for an hour and a half. One, I really enjoyed the drive, but I was actually really thinking about why did I come this far to kind of sort of like share what I'm doing. And hearing what John shared is why I'm here, is because we can work on a local level while also having national impact. And that consistency is why I've stayed as a long-standing volunteer for this network that we're all part of. And today I want to kind of sort of like share a bit about my experience of volunteering with a local school only a mile from my house. And I'm going to offer a couple of tips about how potentially you might have that confidence to stand up and say, I can build those relationships. So as Will shared, I'm a creative entrepreneur. So I've run a number of creative businesses through my career. And in fact, I'm just going to tuck this wire in. I've run a number of creative businesses throughout my career. And 10 years ago, I exited a design agency, sold my shares in that to set up CoLab, very much around a focus of how we can then raise the dial in education and inspire young people to really reach their potential through the power of video storytelling. Who's watched the TED Talks? We all have. And, you know, that's such a powerful platform, such a powerful movement, but it's not the one video that you watch. It's about how that inspires you to then make a change, make a movement. So hopefully today we'll kind of sort of like pass over some of that kind of advice, that not saying I'm going to be as powerful as a TED presenter, but it will kind of give you an insight into thinking about how you might change your path, how you might kind of sort of reach out and make some of those connections that Will talked about. I'm a social activist. I want to make a change. You know, that's why I volunteer as part of the Enterprise Advisor Network, is because we all have then the ability to raise that dial of aspirations with young people. And that's so important when we're thinking collectively of everyone in the room, of how we can then help those future leaders to be one sat here, but also to tackle some of those statistics that John shared earlier, where the rise in unemployment and all of then the challenges that young people are facing. I'm also a dyslexic thinker, so I'm going to share a little bit around how that kind of sort of works. There's obviously a huge shift now and lots more people being diagnosed with SEND conditions. But from somebody who was educated in the 80s and 90s, I'm now in a position where I can actually wear that with a proud label, because it's allowed me to think differently. And also one of the reasons why I love video storytelling, because I haven't got someone red penning me, which is important. I have got Labrador energy, so I might be moving around a little bit. I'm quite bouncy, and, you know, that's one of the reasons why I kind of run a small business. And similar to like Will, I was chatting to John, I like to get outdoors and kind of sort of like exploring a father of 2 children, which are going to be going to the school, which I volunteer at. So just a question that I wanted to put into your head just while you're going through this presentation is, how are we going to prepare young people for a world of work that's constantly changing? And especially with the rise of AI, who's using AI at the moment? Who sees it as real value? And we all see it. And personally, for me, I've already used it 3 times today. And most of the time I was driving over here, but I was using it through my maps. I was using it through me making sure that I was able to check my emails this morning. And I've actually got some AI running in the background. But interesting enough, hearing what John said about young people feeling so scared of this new technology, we really need to think about how we're going to be preparing them for this world of work. Personally, for me, the shift needs to happen from not the focus on the educators for this complex problem. And there was too much responsibility which I feel is put onto people who are here to teach rather than people in industry that can actually offer some of that collaborative advice, guidance, and build collaborative pathways for them young people to really be prepared for the world of work. And that's one of the other reasons why I'm a long-standing volunteer with this network, because I feel it's actually part of my duty running small businesses and employing, kind of young creatives and people who are looking for opportunities, is how can we prepare them for the world of work rather than just putting that emphasis on then school and education. We're going to talk a bit about the why, what and how today, but my personal why is how we can then level the playing field so everyone can reach their potential. Or pretty much everyone put their hand up for TED Talks, and what a movement. That gives the ability for everybody to have that same knowledge transfer. And that's something which I'm really kind of sort of like on a mission to do, is how can we then help people to have an understanding and broaden their horizons, especially around careers education. So our ways that we do that is that we're raising the aspirations through video storytelling, but in early talent, so they can understand what's behind the door. Even when people think about education, so many people have this presumption that you get great school holidays and you only work half of the year. My dad was a disgruntled teacher. It's one of the reasons why I love education, but I wouldn't want to become a teacher, because I saw the additional work that he was doing outside of actually teaching. So it's all of those kind of preconceptions, those presumptions that we're really on a mission to do. And similar to Will, we're kind of sort of like helping to then allow employees to raise their understanding, how they can be competent through then video storytelling and blended learning. As I mentioned, I'm partnered with a school which is only a mile from my house. You can see here on then the map, this is where I live and this is where our school is. I'm so excited that my kids are going to be able to walk across a field to get to school, or a couple of fields. And I grew up in the 80s when that was socially acceptable. I want them to have that independence. I want them to be able to be in a position where they can actually make their own decisions. And that's why I'm really passionate to support my local school. It is a bit like the Hotel California, because once you enter, you can never leave. The students, there's been a number of times where I'm like, I'm done here. I've done everything that I possibly can. I've supported them. We've built the infrastructure, which I'm going to talk about today. And I go in, speak to one of the students, and I'm like, I'll just stay. And I go back to my wife and say, I didn't leave. Because it's something which you want to keep committed to. And that's one of the bits which is what I want to share today, is how then you create that really win-win situation for a partnership. But our shared why, going back to then this kind of sort of like why piece, is that we want to build bridges with local employers, local businesses for South Charnwood. So I want one of the first kind of, these aren't so much tips, but these are maybe kind of, sort of like suggestions for you. You know, you've all got a good understanding about what you do, but I really want us to be thinking about what's in it for them. And it was talked about earlier, from then the business and the educator. But the most important thing is the students. What's in it for them? Too often I see, especially when working with then schools, people are so caught up on maybe measuring the wrong metrics, maybe looking at the wrong kind of sort of ways to approach. And actually by talking to the students and finding out what's in it for them is really empowering for them. And it will save you some time. Now, over 51% said that it's a lack of time. And I'm going to share with you about how we've empowered some of our students to really fly the flag and save us some time, but also build a really strong network. As mentioned, I'm a dyslexic thinker, but I lead with curiosity. It's one of the reasons why I run a small creative business. And I'm really kind of sort of like passionate to think in a constructively disruptive way. We've all heard of Uber and those different bits, but there are ways for us then to look at how we can change and we can raise the dial for this. But I'm results driven. I have to think about what's the end game. Is there going to be an actual purpose to this? And that's one of the bits which I'm really keen. And I'm sure we all share that, but too often I've seen that dial not change, but volunteering with then the Careers and Enterprise company for 10 years, that consistency, but change has happened. And that's what kind of keeps, personally for me, motivated to keep pushing forward. One of the things which I've often seen is, and certainly being dyslexic, I had to do my GCSE English 3 times so I could go to university, but I was so dedicated that I was going to get there. But often we're then looking at that assessment criteria as then the way that we measure our success. And actually, when it comes to careers, a lot of especially dyslexic thinkers, and Richard Branson, education wasn't his, or the academic wasn't his clear pathway. But we all know him, we all see that kind of success. So there's not one size fits all, as we've all seen this kind of image before. But for me, my brain is thinking about connections. That's what I wrote down earlier of what am I looking for from today, is connect with other people focused on on the same North Star. How can we raise that dial of aspiration? With Einstein, the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And I see that all too often where we've got great intentions, but we're time poor. And then we go back to resort back to then just something which is a simple way of us doing it, but we're wanting then a shift in that kind of difference. And today I'm going to share a couple of tips about how we've made life easier at South Charnwood. So our challenge initially was to think about me volunteering in a really remote school and how we can then build a successful enterprise program. But very quickly, the equation didn't add up. One of the first questions, and I want you to meet Simon. He did want to come today, but obviously he's very busy and he's in Leicestershire running the school. He was the deputy head then, now the head teacher. So I've worked with him for over 10 years. And when I first asked him about how are we going to build a business network and where do we get our volunteers from? It's like, I'll just speak to my mates at football. I was like, I don't think that's the strategy that we really want. And how can we build on that? So for me, straight away, I was thinking, how can we then expand on that? But the great thing was that very quickly we realized that the answer was that we needed to then calculate a different solution to then the problem. And hence why we then looked at how we can then build a business network. So our business network, I'm going to talk a bit about the strategy in a minute, but our business network is called SCUBA, which is South Charnwood United Business Alliance, which is a bit of a mouthful. But a year 10 student came up with that 9 years ago. And interesting enough, one of his peers came back to the school last week, now works for Dyson, is offering a national work experience. So for me personally, the circle has been complete. And now they're passing that back on. But the strategy for us was that I needed to support Simon and his team to think more like an SME. Businesses, especially small businesses, are built on network, reputation, and how that kind of works. Schools operate in a very different way. But actually, to build a network, it's thinking about how you can build those connections. So that was one of the things which we're really keen to do. But rather than us focusing on doing it for the students, it was how we could do it with them. So where the real kind of innovation came from was, with the permission of the school, we then created the business ambassadors. And these were year 10 students who would actually drive forward the events and then build the network. And I'm going to share with you a bit about how they kind of help build that. In fact, just before I do that, this is a video of the previous head, Andy Morris, who is now retired. I just wanted to share this video with a little bit so you get an understanding more of what SCUBA is all about.
So I thought the students were fabulous. The level of engagement and the fact that they've organised it and the fact that they've taken such an active role in it, I thought was a real credit to them, Scott.
They were absolutely fantastic. Really, really engaging, lots of interesting questions.
My name is Hannah Pearson, and me and my complete business ambassadors are thrilled to see you this evening. It is my pleasure to represent this unity and sincerely hope that our time shared with you tonight represents the promising relationship between student and USS.
Everybody who's come has said that they want to contribute to the school and actually, most excitingly, do something for the pupils and give back into our community.
It is imperative for any business that is looking to employ people that they need to play an active part in development of any potential candidates, right from school level onwards.
Right, I'm going to stop that there. I don't know if it's maybe because I've got two microphones on and the audio is playing up. But you got a gist of what was going on. What was really important was hearing from the students and then one of the local employers and building that kind of sort of like bridge between the two. One of the things which really worked from the go-get was that we gave the students autonomy. And that was in the bit which was really challenging for especially the senior leadership team, because it was then that trust of how we're going to give year 10s autonomy to then build this network. Obviously, I worked with them and I got quite hands-on to support and guide them about how we can then think about then the strategies and how we can then make sure that we could build a business network. But also, as mentioned with Simon Andrews, he's really kind of sort of passionate and he went above and beyond to support those students, but listening to them and trusting them as talent and treating them more as then colleagues rather than just pupils. And that's the real shift. And one of the reasons why I really am passionate to go back to South Charnwood and excited for my kids to go there, because they're listened to. And that's the important part, is how then you can then kind of create that dialogue and allow them to have that kind of autonomy, because that is what then builds the ownership and that trust. A little short story about the business ambassadors, and from when we've kind of sort of filmed that video, and that was pre-pandemic, was the fact that the business ambassadors then hire the next group. It was a little bit like The Apprentice the first time around. They were kind of almost Alan Sugar, and that's what they thought business was. You're fired, or you've got the job, and all of this stuff. And we were like, and that's not kind of how business works. But it was that passion and that ownership that they had because they were passing the baton on. And now, as I mentioned, having then Holly to then come back in and give back to the school and asked her, why are you here? And she went, well, because I felt like I was at home at this school. Which is, really kind of sort of like compliment to then the school, but also very much about how we built this network and how it's then sustainable. The magic source, though, was we created a student call centre. Who likes making phone calls? Not me either. We live in a world now where it's all about digital, and, even kind of sort of like it was great answering for a digital one, but actually standing up and putting yourself forward, because that's the society we live in, especially for young people. My kids won't talk to me unless it's a video call on a phone. So it's that whole piece of, kind of we need to look at how we can then support them and empower them, because it's such an important skill. But one, we were doing that, so we put them out their comfort zone. But when we got the group of business ambassadors, the phone round, and with that whole approach was, can you help me to understand about the world of work? And would you like to come and join our network? How can you say no? And that was the secret sauce, to be honest. That's what built the network. And I'd really recommend how you can then do that. It got so successful, I nearly brought them a gong, because it was like a call centre and they were empowered. I'd go in and say, oh, look, we've got these guys and these come in here and look at the database that we're building. And these were then year 10 saying, look at the database we're building. I was like, this is just amazing. How are we creating this? But that was a really kind of sort of like important piece. So if you are looking to set that up, is thinking about how you can give the students that ability and that autonomy to then really be the marketeers, be the people that can then push that forward rather than just putting all that time on you. Because Kath, who was then the careers leader at the time, she was still doing work while she had the call centre in the room. So you're all time poor, but that was an ability for us then to really kind of sort of level that up. We had then 10 people on the phones. The thing which was so important, this is something which I've always done running a business, and certainly my first business I didn't do, but the second one was we were very clear on building a CRM and building the database, because your network is so important. So there's various CRMs out there. There's lots of free ones. We still use mainly Google Drive. And if you've got Google Classroom, having in that way to then share, one, your CRM, but also the marketing assets. When I came to then put this presentation together, it was then really important I could go in there and find that old video and find then some of that content, because we've got that archive and we built those systems. So I'd really recommend it's thinking about how you're going to build your comm strategy and how then you make sure that you're building that database. The other important thing is teams, roles, responsibilities. Rather than just the careers lead doing it all, one of the things which I really pushed on was how can we get the admin team at the school to help us with this? Because we're all admin heavy. You know, everyone's got an inbox, everyone's got those different bits, but actually delegating that out, and I had to push really hard. We managed to get 1 hour a week to help with that admin, but that really took some of that pressure off. So it's thinking about how you can bring in the whole team together. The other bit which is really important is some staff CPD. And for the business owners, business volunteers in the room, networking might seem quite easy to us. Certainly friends and colleagues that I've worked with who are in education, networking is very alien. That's not how you've had to then navigate your careers. That's not how you've grown and built your connections. So actually us then going to a few networking events, and I took Simon to some quite heavy networking events. Interesting enough, we still use some of then the systems that he borrowed from those networking events that are now part of the way that we work. So I don't know if anyone's heard of B&I. Yeah? So B&I, I took him there and it was intense for him. And he came back and said, what is this? What's going on? But he then adopted and took some of then the ways that they worked to then help us then build that database and build those connections with local businesses. Another quick story about Simon. He's a maths teacher at heart. And hence why I was kind of looking at the equation. When I first told him about a network, he didn't really see what it was. And I was like, just trust me. Let me build this network and they will come because people want to then support. When we got 40 people in the room, he went, okay, I get it. And then we were at a Christmas event and he went round and he was flyering every person in the room and he was networking. So he then saw then the ability because it was an evidence base. So it is once again about building that trust. That's where that CPD is really important. Don't expect people just straight away to understand what it is that you're trying to build. The other bit is the agility. So test, learn and burn as a small business is really important to me. So we have to test and measure to see if something's working. And if it's not working, then we can get rid quite quickly. That's quite hard when you're in a school and you've got more 2-3 year strategies. But when you're thinking about then your careers program, especially building a network, you've got to then think with a longer term strategy, but how you can then test and measure to see if that works. So an example of that, we moved it to a monthly event and it was just too much admin. But more importantly, there wasn't the appetite from the businesses. So we weren't getting that response. So we went back to then just doing it on a quarterly or termly base. But you'll know what works for you and talk to then your kind of audience, talk to the businesses and see what works for you and them. But our mantra is that quality over quantity. So the ripple effect from this, and obviously you're all thinking about the why, and it's quite a lot of work to do a networking event. But now we've got a database of around 400 active businesses that we can reach out to and do things like meet the sector, speed networking, guest talks, all of these different events. And that's then allowed us to really have that database, which is making everyone's life easier. So Tony, who's now our careers lead, she can then straight away reach into that database, is also not reliant on me and my network. I still do network South Charm and I'm passionate to do so, but it's not that reliance on me as then the business development kind of manager or that role. And this going back to the picture of then our first group of business ambassadors, right through to then we won an award with then the East Midlands Chamber, which is a really proud moment. And we weren't expecting that. But the Chamber actually reached out to us and had seen what we were then doing. So once again, with networks, and the Chamber's got a huge database, they offer free membership for schools. They really want to help build these bridges. So that was a learning for us, but I'd really recommend for you guys to kind of get in touch with your Chamber. The huge shift, and this is the hardest bit, is an open mindset. And that's so difficult when you're time poor. And I get it. The easiest thing is just to say, I haven't got the time, because we don't have the time. But if you think of that more 2 to 3 year strategy about what can we build and how can we test and measure those results, it becomes then a bit easier. So rather than from being risk avert of have we got the time to do this in the short month span, to how can we then create then the opportunities and we're ready for them in the future. You're all being forced, every educator in the room is being forced around this work experience. And I know it's tough. You know, it's exciting. I really see the value in work experience, but to build those connections and get every young person to have a work experience encounter is going to be difficult. And it's how can we then build those bridges? So it's thinking about now you've got a purpose, now you've got that kind of sort of like why to do it, but think that longer term strategy. So for us, our next steps, and one of the things which is really nice, I mentioned to Tony earlier, when I last saw her, and she's adopted all of these systems and it's worked really well. And that's what's the nice. It hasn't been me doing training. She's adopted it. And her words at the last event was, "I've got a vision, Dan." And for me, I'm like, okay, you've got a vision, let's go. And that suddenly excited me. And that was then the thing that's motivated me again. Because she's got then that autonomy and she's got her business ambassadors behind her, that can then really be pushed forward. And off the back of that, we've now embedded all of our careers provision as then an annual event. So now that strategy is embedded, and for me personally, my whole mission was about how do I create a culture of enterprise within the school? So when my kids go to South Charnwood, they can then be part of then those initiatives so they can carry on building on them. Just a quick recap then. So these are the main 5 things. So just thinking about what's in it for them. You've got to create this win-win situation. And obviously that's what today is about. We can then test and explore some of those ideas and chat to each other. And everybody wants the same kind of outcome. And everyone's focused on the same North Star. Well, I hope they are. We've got then building that autonomy, the student call centre. Really think about your systems and common strategy. If there's one thing that you take away, it's thinking about how you build that CRM. And then test, learn and burn as quickly as possible so you can really think about what works for you. Because there isn't one size fits all for this. So if you do want to connect with me, Will suggested about LinkedIn. I'm a huge fan for LinkedIn. I don't actually use business cards anymore. So feel free to scan this QR code. Hopefully it works. But connect with me on LinkedIn. Happy to then share any advice and any ideas that you've got, but also to then network you. So I'm in Leicestershire, but we work across the country. So there might be someone that I might be able to introduce you to. And it's all about building those connections because one person can then ripple to another person. And that's where we can make the positive change that we're all after. Thank you very much.
So just to set you up in terms of what's going to be going on between now and when we finish. So we've got this fabulous panel here who are going to explore a number of questions around national policy, school leadership, business insights around creating connections, and practical implementation ideas as well in terms of supporting careers provision. I'm going to just introduce the panel. Obviously, everybody knows John and Dan. I'm going to work down the line. We've got Katrina Pearce, who is the Regional Business and Stakeholder Manager for the Federation of Small Businesses, supporting the self-employed and independent businesses across Lincolnshire and Nottinghamshire. She helps SMEs, sole traders and startups across the county to access on-demand advice, funding guidance, care, events and other growth opportunities. She acts as the primary lobbyist for the independent business community, campaigning for better support and economic conditions for local businesses. Katrina also leads delivery of the Greater Lincolnshire Local, the Skills Improvement Plan, a Department for Education initiative that aims to bridge better connections between local employers and the learning and training landscape to plug skill gaps and support key sectors.
That's long, isn't it?
It's super. That's just what it is. I know you're coming, Mark. Oh, it's okay. Yeah, it's super. That's what it is. There's loads of great experience and knowledge there. So, we've also got Steve Penny, head of Sixth Form, St Peter and St Paul Voluntary Academy, and he also teaches sociology, criminology, and history, and has 30 years teaching and leading in secondary schools, 25 of which have been here in Lincoln. His interests and passions are in the context of education include lifelong learning, holistic inclusive education, boys underachievement, curriculum development, online and blended learning, and work-based interactions with schools. Okay, have you managed to squeeze anything else in, Steen, that time? Because that's Buggy's too.
He's got another paragraph. He could.
No, that's right. And then we have Mark on the end. Mark has spent more than 3 decades at the heart of business growth, founding 6 companies, selling 3, and mentoring countless leaders along the way. His journey began with self-funded ventures and evolved into businesses backed by external investment, giving him a rare perspective on what it really takes to start, scale, and succeed. Above all, Mark is recognised as a steward of growth. Those who have worked with him highlight his focus on building sustainable businesses that thrive not just on profit, but on people, culture, and values. They credit him with helping them unlock potential they didn't know they had. And Mark is the founder and business growth mentor at his own company, Mark Jarvis Business Mentoring. Again, wonderful experience to have on the panel. So the title of our session is Building Careers Provision That Works. And we're going to explore the pathways to success through policy and intent, linking that with how that's implemented and the outcomes and impact that it leads to. Just a reminder, Slido's up there. I've said it already, but if you do want to ask any questions from anything from today, you'll put that to the panel and just put it on the Slido. We'll track it as we go. I might pop a few in as we move through. And also, if you wanted to put it to someone in particular, just make sure you put your name in there, because I might end up positioning it to someone you didn't want to answer it. So we're going to kick off. I'm going to ask John. John, careers policy is being shaped by the country's skills gaps and economic priorities. What role do schools play in responding to these challenges, and how can they be sure their career provision aligns with both national policy and local labour market needs?
Good question. And I suppose my starting point would be to make things as straightforward as possible. Because so there's one thing to take from this. It is that the Gatsby benchmarks have served us well in growing things to date over the last 10 years. They have been revised, and that has lifted the bar. So I think for schools and colleges, coming to terms with those revised benchmarks is the most important thing to do right now. And that we've just launched the revised benchmarks on the Compass platform that all of you in education should be able to access. So it gives you a really important guide to that. Labour market information is part of those Gatsby benchmarks. So there's a natural link through from doing that work to making a connection with the economy. So I sort of would start off with the most straightforward response, which is that one. I think there is a lot of learning that can be undertaken through connecting with business, and that's been the focus of the conversations this morning. So I think the more engagement that schools and colleges can undertake in the way that has taken place this morning, the better. And some of that can also be facilitated through something called the Careers Impact System, which if for those of you that want to go further, I would recommend looking that up through the Careers and Enterprise Company website, because it's a really structured way to embed careers even further within your overall direction in your strategic journey as an institution. And it involves peer-to-peer engagement across different schools, across different trusts, and across different colleges. So a couple of quite practical opportunities there. Revised benchmarks are now on Compass. Engage with those. I'm sure people are already. But the Careers Impact System is the other plug I would make on that.
Brilliant. Thanks, John. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to ask Katrina because one of the parts of that question was about kind of local labour market. So I kind of wonder what your knowledge and insights about what's needed in the local labour market, how it might marry up with national strategy.
Yeah, well, try not to bore you. That's the first thing. I think probably asking that question now of all years when we've become a devolved administration, that gives us a lot more certainty, or at least say, and local leaders making localised decisions for the businesses, the schools, the people primarily, and that includes, those coming through into the workforce this year, next year, and beyond. So I think the fact that we're going to be in charge of what doesn't potentially affect you guys so much, but the add-on skills fund being devolved, and that's a huge opportunity for us. Local businesses not tend to think about huge national policy so much. They just don't. It's not in their kind of DNA in the busyness of what they've got to do. They will, however, really hone in on localised policy because it feels like it's meant for them. It's more meaningful. It's something they can often help shape and engage with. So I think where national policy absolutely has the ultimate role to play, you'll find employers will sit up and listen and take more notice of a more localised policy. Just having Greater Lincolnshire in the name can often get them to perk up and open their eyes a little bit more. So I think this year of all years, I think that's probably more of an opportunity than ever, really.
Brilliant. Thanks. Could you just pass the mic to Steve? Steve, I'm listening to that, and I'm just thinking from the perspective of your experience of leading sixth form and bringing in the student voice. I mean, because that's a different perspective, isn't it, between national, local, but also students. What do you hear? What do you notice about what students want, and how that fits with that bigger picture?
Well, I think students, we shouldn't underestimate them. Certainly, by the time they get to sixth form, they're very well equipped to understand what their own strengths and weaknesses are. One of the things I spend a lot of time thinking about is developing soft skills that they transfer into the workplace rather than simply academic qualifications. So I spend a lot of time thinking about and talking to businesses about what kind of skills they actually want from our young people, and whether it's and the idea that I was speaking to John earlier about, I asked him, well, what do you actually want? If you ask the students, they're very well aware of their gaps in their skills, particularly around answering emails, picking up the phone, networking. If you put them into this environment, they will be absolutely terrified. And that's one of the things that we need to try and challenge. And one of the things I certainly try to challenge when I set up my my business partnerships, to get them into the real world with people who aren't teachers. And by the time they're in sixth form, as I said, they already know this. They're identifying their own strengths and weaknesses. And so they're quite open to the opportunity to develop those areas.
Great. Thanks, Steve. Anybody else want to just comment on that national strategy, big picture, local, what's going on locally from a strategy and planning point of view? Mark, do you want to?
Yeah, I'll put my 2 penny worth in for what it's worth. So as an employer of almost 200 people across the country now, the concept of attitude over aptitude, I think, is something that I'm very, very conscious of. Our recruitment policy has developed into something which prioritizes attitude over aptitude. And I think sometimes when we look at the different institutions that exist here in the room, we are schools and colleges and academies and all sorts of things like that, and a mixture of employees. We're all businesses doing something. We have different constraints, but businesses have constraints in the same way that government education establishments all have constraints. They're just slightly different, but we're all working under different rules. And I think if we can find a way, or when we can find a way to truly work together to appreciate the rules and constraints that we're each working under, then I think we've got an opportunity to really help our clients, and our clients are our students. For us, our clients are the next generation of employees in my businesses. Those are my clients. I'm talking about customers and stuff like that. My business thrives on my team. And if I can support my next generation of employees, then I've got a sustainable business. And I think when we can find a way to do that, then I think we've got a way forward. Do we bow to the constraints of national government? Yes, we do. My view in terms of small businesses is that we will do business despite the government, whatever that is. Because the government changes, but my businesses don't. Some have been running for nearly 30 years. So I think if I was to take a message away, it would be, let's find a way to support our common clients. And our common clients are our students, are our young people. And when we can find a way to do that collectively and collaboratively, then we've got a strong way forward, even if that's just at a local level.
A really, really clear message there about strengthening the local labour market as well. And, bringing through great talent in the future within the county. Brilliant. John, can I ask you a little bit more about the work experience guarantee? So obviously it's a new promise, and based on what we know within this group today, the starting point for that is everybody acknowledges, or at least 86% of people acknowledged in the survey that we conducted before this session, that there's a huge area of improvement that's required to make that happen, I think. What's your take on that in terms of where you think key challenges are and how we can embrace those challenges and do something constructive with it?
Yeah, I think there are several challenges that we could all cite, and we probably have spoken about some of them during the course of today already. For me, it's about the opportunity, and it's about the opportunity to think over the next few years, how can we build a better future for young people? And Mark has just spoken about that talent pipeline, the client sort of facing approach. If we think about a year 7 just starting in secondary today, what can we hope for them in terms of the rich range of experiences that they're going to get by the time they've finished year 11, at least, and moving into post 16? I think that, so for me, there is something about, we're reimagining the system, reimagining something that hasn't worked for a long time, or hasn't even existed in some places for quite a while. Let's plan and think about that over a consistent period of time. Let's not just kind of rush at something and expect it's going to transform overnight when it hasn't done so for 40 years. Let's think longer term. Let's build the kind of relationships that I thought Dan's session and the rest of the morning kind of really started to emphasize, because it's through a broader range of relationships between schools, colleges and business that we will ultimately get to a better position for those young people. But it is, from our perspective, it's starting earlier, it's having a broader range of experiences, it's not having long placements, consistently, it's thinking about it in a different way.
Brilliant. Which is a really nice setup for Dan, because thinking about it in a different way is your thing. So from your experience, and obviously you shared it earlier, but, what have you seen in terms of you go, yeah, this really works, and in terms of giving those young people career experiences?
Yeah, I think a big area is not to have them that block work experience. We don't work in a block fashion anymore. Everyone does generally work hybrids, and we've got them technology, we've got these options. How to create then a bit more of a kind of dynamic experience, but certainly for young people just to apply their minds into a sector and see if it's the right fit for them. I was talking to a few people this morning, and everyone can remember their work experience. It might be good and bad, but that's not a bad thing to have a bad experience, because you know that you don't want to go down that pathway. I think actually opening it up, because we have got to create these work activities for young people, and especially, kind of sort of year 7, 8, 9, it's that whole piece about how can we give those short blasts of experience where people go, actually, this fits with my personality traits, this fits with the way that I'm kind of sort of like thinking, and I feel that I could add some value to this, or I won't add value, and then people can start making a few more strategic decisions from then the young person's perspective, but also them reaching out to them parents to think about how they can help with an element of networking. And I think that's kind of an opportunity which schools can kind of reach in. Now, I didn't mention in my presentation, but we sent out an email to all the parents, and they then came and offered, because there was lots of small businesses that wanted to kind of contribute because of their children being there, but that's passed over to other children that are in the school. So I think there's huge capital that we can reach in to kind of achieve quite a complex problem, but it's not certainly the block week or 2 week work experience.
Brilliant. Thanks. So you're kind of teeing us up now into delivery, how we deliver, how we implement on policy and intent. So, and Steve, how can businesses and schools best work to turn policy intent into real experiences that inspire and prepare students for work?
Well,
that's no kind of that's how you're there.
That's a great question, isn't it? I think that you have to be realistic about what it is you intend to achieve. I think it would be wonderful, as John implied there, to suddenly transform it into something that we all want. That's not going to happen overnight. I've always been really realistic and really straightforward with what I wanted to achieve specifically. which students, which skills, what experience that should look like, and how long it should last for. So I've been really clear in all my negotiations with business partners. And when I approached Mark, I was very clear about what it is I actually wanted and why I wanted it. And Mark, luckily for me, bought into that. I think one of the reasons that I'll have to ask Mark this question, but one of the reasons that Mark bought into the plan was that it was a shared plan, and I had empathy for the employer as well. And Mark showed empathy for the school, and I showed empathy for the business. And if we have empathy for each other and understand each other's positions, what we're trying to get out of it, then we've got a far better chance of it actually coming to fruition. I would also say, and going along about the block work experience, I think that if it needs to be, what's the best way to describe it? It needs to be future-proof. It can't be a tick box that happens once every 6 months. It needs to be consistent. It needs to be relied upon. The students need to know they're going to get it, and they need to know what they're going to get out of it. So Mark comes to us every fortnight without fail, and the students are set homework. The students buy into it. They can see what they're getting out of it. They can see the skills that they're being taught, and it's not by a teacher. And I think that is a really, really important thing to remember. They see a lot of teachers, and lots of teachers say the same thing, and they repeat it a lot, right? By the time they're in 10 and 11 and 12, they need to see somebody else. They need to see somebody with a different perspective, and somebody in the wider world who's prepared to invest some time in them specifically. So going back to the question, I think, is that you've got to be really realistic and specific, and create some boundaries, create a framework, and stick to it, and then review it, and then see whether you can make it better.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Didn't Patrice, you want to go out to that?
Yeah, I can chip in for what it's worth. On that point about being realistic about what a school is asking for, what that young person is asking for, being really, really clear and specific and realistic to an organisation that you might be asking their time, their resource, their expertise. And just to throw some stats at you, there's 41,000 enterprises in Greater Lincolnshire. Oh, just say hold it properly. Only 120 of those are large enterprises. So what you're dealing with is a lot of businesses quite under the cosh, probably not as resourced as you'd like them to be. And to offset that, in terms of their morale at the moment, those kinds of businesses that are extremely under the cosh, given what we've been dealing with the last 5-6 years of economic doom loop that it feels like we're in, their optimism and their confidence at the moment in that SME community is at the second lowest point it's ever been recorded since outside of the COVID era, because they are tired. So there's a bit of a moral versus morale point here. And morally, those businesses absolutely want to step up. They recognise the benefit to themselves in feeding their future workforce, being part of their community, looking after the schools and doing all the right things. That's the moral point. But the morale is what you're kind of getting with some tired businesses who are kind of, do you want me to sponsor the football team? Is it a Raffle prize you're after? What is it you're after me from now? So there does have to be they do have to have a stake in it. That's probably why you're seeing those businesses and those parents step forward when they are asked for some time, because their children are in that school. So it's not that businesses don't care or don't have time for you, but they are really under the cosh, and their morale's pretty low at the minute. So presenting them with a realistic ask that kind of respects their time, I think, is the biggest way to get them over.
Brilliant. Thanks, Katrina, for that really cheery message. But
Sorry. Hate to cheer.
Yeah, just to add to that, because when Tony last week said, "I've got a vision, Dan," that filled my morale. And if she hadn't have said that, and I was thinking, and if she hadn't responded to an email, or she hadn't have given me that positive reinforcement that we're going in the right direction, but more importantly, the emphasis wasn't on me, I would have left with them more of a sour taste. So I think it's that collaboration about saying, all right, how can we support each other and find that common ground? And when there is that win-win situation that's been talked about, that's what will boost that morale, because it is tough in small business at the moment. But we know that the importance is to invest in the future. But I think, as educators, you can do that. A cup of tea and a biscuit goes a long way. And it's those different bits, or just a simple phone call saying you're doing a great job, like thank you, and all of those bits. And I think that's what I'd really suggest is reach out to your contacts and say, how can we then achieve this together? Because that's then the motivators needed.
Yeah. And it's really, this is really pertinent for you. I've been scanning the questions coming in, and I'd like to go to Mark next, but I'm going to read this question that's come in on Friday. So we know the Lincolnshire labour market is predominantly SMEs, which is what we're talking about. How do we best mobilise SMEs for work experience and engaging with schools? Now, you're just beginning to open that up there, I think, Dan. So Mark, can you talk to that?
Can I comment on what I point very briefly? Yes, because it is playing on my mind. It won't go away. A couple of thoughts, if I may, to take on Steve's point. One of the things that I think is making the program that I'm working with Steve, I'm effectively teaching them what it takes to start a company, and teaching young people to inspire them to understand actually you can start a business is not something that's taught that I'm aware of anywhere else, even at college and university level, academically perhaps, but really not. So to be able to inspire them to say, do you know what, if you want to start a business, here's things that you can actually do to start a business, and this will work. And I think when we did the presentation last year, a lot of the businesses that were in the audience, imagine a Dragon's Den style thing. A lot of the businesses said, do you know what, you guys, to the students, you could actually do that. That would work, because we'd set them up in such a way that they could actually understand how to start a business. And I think that they found that very inspiring. So if you were going to take an enrichment activity into your classes, into your students, find something that they can't find out anywhere else. That would be a tip. And another point I would make, and it's a question, I don't have an answer to this one yet. Thinking about the work experience thing, one of the things that I've learned over the years is that not all students are ready for work experience in the year that they have to do it. I haven't, the government decides that. The councils decide that. We don't have an answer to that. But is there something that we could do collectively to support our young people to do their work experience at a time that was better for them as they're growing as young people? That's my only comment. You'd have to ask me the question again, Will. Could I?
Yeah, both comments obviously absolutely valuable. It was to do with this, how do we best mobilise SMEs? So, given the context Katrina was rightly saying at the moment in the market, what advice would you give from the position in a busy, someone who knows on other businesses how to do that?
I think generally speaking, as an employer, nationally or locally, we want to help. I wouldn't have invested my day here today if I didn't want to help. Of course I want to help. And I think that that's true of the majority of SMEs. I think you would agree, Katrina?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I think the biggest challenge for us is we don't really know how. We have the desire, we have an understanding of how it might help us as employers, but we don't really know how to bridge the gap between what you guys, what the education establishment are offering and what our win is. I think I'm drawn to the slide that Dan put up earlier on with the triangle. Do you remember that, where it had businesses and then education and then students at the top? And I referred to students as our clients. That's our connector, if you like, the students as clients. So I think if we can better understand how to help you and understand how we benefit from that help, then I think we've got perhaps a bit of a stronger foundation. So you're somewhere to answer the question.
I think so, yeah.
I should have been a politician, shouldn't I?
Well, yeah. And then you could sort the whole problem out. Absolutely. And Dan will start. Oh, Steve, yeah, do your work down. Just grab it up and, steal it.
I think it goes back to the point about partnership and empathy. I asked Mark to do something specific, it was within his skill set to do that. He felt comfortable doing that. And then together, but the majority of the work was done by Mark writing the if you like, program of study for the students that was planned out. He shared it with me. As an educationalist, I made maybe 2 comments, and then I let Mark do it, but I trusted him to do it. And I think you've got to be able to be in a position to trust people to do those things, because if you don't, if you keep making more demands, putting red tape in their way, then the joy goes out of it altogether. So Mark, I'll let Mark get on with it. I trust him. The kids trust him. And I think because of that, it works much better.
That's what's about mobilising the businesses. One thing independents do is they follow each other's lead quite a lot. If some have had really good experiences, they will go, great, I'll go with you. Give me an example. How did it work? If they have negative experiences, they'll do the same, just like any consumers of anything do. But I think peer support programs for offering work experience targeted to the micros, the smaller businesses that are growing, and those well-established medium-sized businesses, I think could go a really long way, because we can provide all the advice and support we like in the world, but they tend to look to each other for a bit of guides, whether it's a bit of peer pressure, who knows, but if it works, it works. But I think there's definitely space for that to be implemented.
Well, yeah, leading on from that and a couple of other points is that we put forwards where we suggest how to pledge, because often people don't know how to offer help, but they want to help. And we just made it really simple, where there was a tick box where you could choose 3 things of doing a mock interview, work experience, or coming to Scuba. And it was those bits there, then we kind of got that response. And I think thinking about kind of asking those questions, but then leading with a couple of case studies to say, these people have already done that. And then that's the social proof that people need to go, actually, I can do that. And it doesn't take a lot of my time. Because another point is, if it is wrapped in red tape and suddenly for a small business, they're going, I've got to do loads of paperwork, I've got to do risk assessment, there's going to be that barrier. So we've delegated to a local charity that do all of the risk assessment for work experience and pay for that. And that's been a real game changer for it. So it's mobilising that to say, we've just got this simple ask for you to do. It's only going to take an hour. I know there's the kind of offer here of just dedicate an hour of your time. It's keeping it really simple for employers to kind of understand what they need to do.
Great, really good next step.
And so when I spoke about making it simple for education, I spoke about the revised Gatsby benchmarks. About 2 years ago, we did something similar for employers called the Employer Standards. There's been around 1,400 employers across England that have completed those standards. So they take about 25 minutes to complete, but it's a really relatively simple way to assess, if you are an employer, how you are doing in the world of sort of careers education in this early support kind of arena. And it gives you then a sort of a sense of where you go next and links to resources. And there was a SME part to that. There's an SME sort of version of that tool. You can find it on the website, on Careers Ed Plus company website.
Brilliant. John, hold on to the mic. Because I'm just tracking what's coming in. There's a real theme in some of these questions that have been coming in, which is about, yes, it's local, but actually Lincolnshire is quite a diverse county. So we've got quite a few questions about coastal communities and how we support them and how they access these opportunities. And there's some really practical stuff simply about, how do we get the transport? How do we pay for the transport? And apprenticeships, Lincolnshire generally, maybe we don't benefit of access to apprenticeships in the same way as they do in cities or in the south. And particularly when you bring that locally again into our own communities, some communities probably can access it more easily than others. So I'm speaking directly to maybe I'm using the East Coast because that was people who asked me a question, but I suspect there are other areas, pockets in rural Lincolnshire, where getting the access to these opportunities is more challenging. So any thoughts on how to address that, John?
Well, I've got lots of thoughts. I mean, firstly, I grew up in Norfolk and on the coast, and so I've got a personal, understanding and appreciation of that particular situation just from my own background, I guess. And it is a challenge. It is something that if I had more influence, a magic wand, etc., I would ask government to invest in transport solutions to help this. So unfortunately, we haven't got that at the moment, and therefore we're having to do the best we can within the resources that we've got. And that looks like, for me, a mixture of building as many networks as you possibly can, thinking about how both in-person experiences relate to virtual experiences, how you can create a broader range of exposure, and through all means possible. It's difficult to provide a single, solution to that, because I think there's lots of things that need to happen, and some of them are outside our control, but the ones in our control are learning from good practice, and there is some good practice that is existing on that, and I think it's about how we can share that.
Brilliant. And really getting a sense that kind of budgets are tight, which requires creativity, doesn't it, around how we use who we know, what resource we've got, that kind of thing. Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, just to add, because we're in a rural area and we've done then the Meet the Sector events, which has worked really well. And one of the students from the previous year, last week, was talking about the employer that came in. So obviously they had a lasting impact on that person. And once then you've got that sense of purpose, and especially for then a year 10, thinking actually that's a direction I might want to take, then they can then encourage, kind of be mobilised potentially through their parents or find money for them, public transport. But by having then, especially with being rural, having then this Meet the Sector has worked really well. And that's something which we're going to continue doing, is inviting then employers in for a set day. And then that's also where you can then hit a whole year group or potentially more.
Do you want to add, Katrina, from your perspective?
Yeah. So when we were last running the employer consultation for the skills improvement plan, this time 3 years ago, accessibility via, the really raw elements like transport was really, really critical. And they're not only just a barrier to work experience, but to wider training and to work. If you're 16 years of age and you want to go into the construction sector, but you've got to be on site at 6 a.m, halfway across the county, that's an immediate barrier to what should be a very rewarding career. So employers are generally quite aware of this, what a challenge it is. And I think in Lincolnshire generally, we're accused of having a bit of a north-south split. I think actually we've really got an east-west split between the rurality, but also economically. Those the western side is viewed rightly or wrongly to be a bit more affluent than the eastern side, and a huge amount of factors play into that. Wealthier parents, those that are a bit more able to, get their children where they need them to be for 6, 7, 8 in the morning. And those are factors that I think employers are very, very aware of, particularly in those sectors that tend to work outside of the 9 to 5 and tend to work outside of city centres. So this is a huge issue. And I think this is something we should be looking to the mayoral authority to be looking to tackle, because this is about work and affluence and people's lives and livelihoods beyond a 2-week work experience, but that's where it all starts. So I think this is absolutely something we need to be looking to them with new strategic transport powers to be trying to solve, and urgently as well.
Steve or Mark, do you want to add to that at all?
Well, I can only comment from a local perspective. Although some years ago I was working with the Careers Academy UK, which was based in Canary Wharf in London. They set up a nationwide mentoring scheme. So essentially businesses adopted or sponsored one of the sixth formers, and that allowed them access to lots of opportunities, and it took them out of their local area. But I absolutely agree with what's been said about the transport links, and Lincolnshire is cursed in that sense, because even down to things like T levels, it's not a level playing field because of the communication difficulties that we have in this county.
I guess all I can do is share my own experience. I'm fortunate, I guess, in many ways, is that most of my businesses are not really rural. However, I have experienced the challenges that we're talking about. And what we did is we funded it ourselves as the business. We funded that transport in exchange for, some skills exchange, but we chose to fund it. It's not a huge expense on our part, but we said, okay, well, we'll pay for your transport. So we did.
Right. And just linking back to some of the stuff you said before, I guess if that is a challenge, then it could be an ask. So, and, are people willing in your network to support that? And to help you get students to these.
And it's completely recognise that it's not the right solution for everybody, but we chose to do it because it was something that we felt responsible for. We were trying to embrace our young people's development, and we thought it was the right thing to do. And and I'm sure I appreciate that that's not everybody's position, but that's what we did.
Yeah, brilliant. I kind of noticing a theme here that my creaks way down one way and then comes back up the other way. Look, hold on to the vault, mate.
Mic drop.
So from the viewpoint of local businesses, what do you think is needed to prepare young people work in the morning?
Katrina's got that look in her eyes. If she's
I'm waiting for this.
Have you got? Do you want?
Yeah, you go. I can come in.
It's a good question. I think we've got an opportunity to demonstrate real social capability. I think that's the key thing that I think is missing, and I think we can probably all agree that the social capability of our young people is diminished over the years quite significantly. How can we collectively, because then if we decided that they're our customers, how can we collectively decide that we're going to help them develop their social skills? Somebody said to me earlier on that the Australians have adopted a policy where they're not allowing anybody under 16 to have a mobile phone. Which I thought, I'm not suggesting we do that. But I think that's key for me, is how can we help our young people develop their social skills? Because, again, that's just not taught. And it's generational. It's generational. When I travel on the train, as I do from time to time, I might be in a compartment with a family, but it's not just the children that are on the phones, the parents are too. So the children are not going to learn these social skills because the parents are not teaching them, because the parents are doing exactly what their parents did. And it's becoming a generational challenge that we have. I think that requires government policy, perhaps turn that around, but I think we can all do our own little bit. That's all I'll say, because chomping at the bit.
Just a little bit. So, yeah, in the last skills improvement plan, Mark II, which is coming next year, by the way, employability was the dominant thing, employability. And it was a kind of thing you could actually put that under a more apt term, which was maturity, which came around time and time again. And a key example of this was, getting themselves to work on time and being presentable and having a good attitude. These were absolutely critical. One of the key themes was around taking and making phone calls. So while have this thing about they're on their phone all the time these days, aren't they? When was the last time any of you rang a restaurant to make a booking? Bet you didn't. I bet you did it as on the phone but we have as a society, we have bred out the need to be making phone calls. I know I damn well avoid a no number on my phone. I'll just stare at it until it goes away because I'm like, don't know who that is. And as an elder millennial, I'm probably one of the founding partners of this problem. But I think this is an issue we've got with beating probably young people with a stick that's a problem society has created around, like you say, national policy around phone ownership or social media access. But we've got employers saying, well, they just won't take a phone call. They're scared to death. They won't make a phone call. We have bred that out of us as a society, and then we're beating young people with those problems. So I think there is a bit of reality check that sometimes as businesses and local leaders that we actually need to have out. Does society require you to have, or do you need some specific learning just because you grow up with that as a common thing to have to do? People that are entering the workforce now don't. And just as a final point before I do shut up, at the moment we're at a unique point in history. We have 5 generations in the workplace. We've got the very youngest boomers still in work, and we've got Gen Alpha entering the workforce. That's a lot of people with a lot of very different expectations of work, a lot of different social skills, a lot of different behaviours, all trying to work together. And we've got a bit of a one-size-fits-all approach to the world of work that arguably Gen Alpha will arguably change that world of work. It's coming. They will absolutely change that world of work. But the elder generations probably aren't quite ready for that yet. But we are the ones, the older generations are the ones that are defining that way they're supposed to work. But it's changing and changing rapidly. But I think it's a problem when we're kind of beating young people with the sticks that society has created.
Yeah. Steve, before you chip in, I want to add something. Maybe you can, I guess, from a student's point of view, this is important as well. So we're talking about that from the perspective of the workplace and maybe what makes a good workplace and people communicating and interacting well together. But there's another dimension, isn't there, which is the health dimension and the responsibility that the employers have for well-being at work now. It's so more prevalent and important. It's not something that can be ignored in the workplace. So I'm just curious, as you answer this question, to think beyond just work, but also, community, health, well-being, responsibilities as well.
I mean, in my teaching, I expect the sixth form to use electronic devices. I almost demand that they use them because that is the future. It's not going away. We need to engage with it. We need to make sure the students use it responsibly and then take it into the workforce responsibly. They know, we shouldn't underestimate them. They know what's right and wrong on social media. They know what's right and wrong on social media by year 9, possibly younger. So we shouldn't underestimate them. My view is we've got to engage with these platforms, show them the benefit of how it can enhance their lives, and push it from that direction. At the same time, remind them of the dangers, but it's not going away. And actually, it's one of those things that can increase cultural capital because they have the ability to connect to the knowledge that's out there wherever they are, whoever their parents are. So I think we need to push that, and we need to push that in the right way and educate them how to use it and how it can, help them to get jobs, help them to network, all those things. So it's a skill that schools need to be aware of, and they need to address it. They don't like making phone calls, but none of us do anymore. I made one phone call yesterday. One phone call. That's normal for me now in my workplace. So you're right. We shouldn't beat them with a stick that maybe we've created. And Joel, you got that?
Yeah, get it, boss. Just a couple of points from me on that. I mean, firstly, to sort of echo previous points, I think people talk about soft skills. I call them personally, I call them essential skills. And I think we've got an understanding from about 1/3 young people across England as to how they rate their essential skills. It's really interesting when you look at that in depth, because young people that are more under-resourced generally have far lower confidence in their skills. They have far less awareness of their future pathways, and they in looking at the links between those and different areas of industry is also quite fascinating. So essential skills for me is how I would refer to that. Secondly, just to sort of put a slightly counterpoint to the general narrative, I think young people nowadays are incredibly enterprising. To pick up on Mark's point, fostering that actually is really important. The amount of young people nowadays that have some kind, they haven't got part-time work necessarily in the same level that previous generations have, but they have side hustles in a way that wasn't available previously because of technology, because of seeing other influences. And I think it's capitalizing on that opportunity as well in the future.
Excellent. So I'm going to just have a look at some of the other questions, put those to the panel, but I am also going to, those of you who aren't so kind of technology minded, who just want to put a hand up and ask a question, I'll give you that opportunity in just a moment. So if you've still got a question burning to ask, be prepared to ask in a moment. Alex, could you be available to do mine? There was one specific question just to you, John, actually. Let me just locate that. Okay, so will this Careers and Enterprise Company be pressing the government to amend the national curriculum in order to help access the enhanced call for meaning for encounters?
A good question. I spoke about the journey that the work experience guarantee has been on since Labour in opposition, and that's that kind of influence from something that was quite bland, if I'm being completely honest, a fortnight work experience, almost assumption being that it was block placement, to where it is now, less pressure on the kind of tick box, more pressure on the quality, thinking longer term. That has been the influence. Sounds arrogant, I guess, but I would say we have had on the system, and that is the influence I would want us to continue to have moving forward in terms of the integration of careers education and preparing young people for their best next step in the curriculum generally. I mean, it wasn't included within the curriculum and assessment review. For those of you that were sort of aware of that, and in education, there was a big curriculum and assessment review. Careers education was specifically excluded from that. It doesn't mean that there aren't opportunities as a result of that, particularly in enrichment, which was something that Mark mentioned, which I think we can exploit. So it's a long way of saying yes, but in a particular way.
Keep hold of it. So I'm quite conscious that the SEND area is really well represented in the room today. And I think this question, or this is an observation, but I think there's a question in here as well. The recent SEND-focused event ran by Careers and Enterprise Company was excellent, very relevant to my school. Can we have more of these? The role of DUC2 through CEC is positive. I think it's DUC2. Does that mean something to you? Yeah, great. Shall we respond to that?
Well, firstly, great that it was useful. SEND was one of the first points I made in my presentation this morning, because it is so important, and that belief that I have, and that so many colleagues in the room will have as well, that every young person has the right to meet their full potential is so significant, so important. So yes, again, I would want there to be far more around this area of work. And it's something that I'm particularly passionate about making sure we do.
Great. Excellent. Alex, can I give you a little one of those? And me just see if you can get that going. So we'll take there's one already here. Either questions, or if if you're sitting there and something's come to mind and you think you'd really like to share that with everybody, you're welcome to, be a virtual panel member as well.
Hello, me. I wanted to ask, the bit of the triangle for me, that has just struck me as missing is the young people. Has there been much consultation, or is there any data to talk about or explore what they want or how they feel about work experience, and if they're passionate about it? Because the worst thing is, as a business, you give your time and then that person is disengaged or not as interested.
John, you can hold it.
That's correct. So, really important question. So we have quite a powerful youth advisory group that for us as an organisation is really, I go to their meetings sort of regularly. They have board members. We have 2 board members directly shaping the policy that we have. So at a national level, young people are directly involved at that level. I spoke about that kind of notion of listening to the voices of young people at scale. So 350,000 young people through feedback from schools and colleges, giving us some direct feedback. But I think more importantly, both of those kind of perhaps more structural levels is kind of work that C was talking about, which is actually engaging directly at a school, at a college level. And that to me is where the dialogue is really powerful. Making that systemic is important. We are clear that what Your Spirit has in Reimagining needs to have some really clear learning outcomes. You wouldn't have 2 weeks of maths classes and not have some learning outcomes from it. So why should we be sending out young people to something that is just random? And part of that, those outcomes need to be shaped and informed by a conversation within people themselves. So I'm sort of almost deferring to Steve on this in terms of some of the comments he's already made about how it works in his school, because for me that was really powerful.
Thanks. Anybody else?
I was just worried. You just word like that. Oh, it's fantastic. Brilliant. I asked them what they wanted. I mentioned earlier that they're of an age where they actually are quite well aware of what they're good at and what they're not good at, and they know where the gaps are. So
we asked them. Before I worked with Mark, I worked with Damien Fobic from Legacy Football Hall, and we based up what we did more on essential skills. So we asked them what they wanted, and they gave us a checklist. They wanted to be able to speak in public. They wanted to build their confidence. They wanted to be able to work in a team, and they wanted it to have a meaningful outcome. So that's what we tried to do. And what it's evolved into is something I do with Mark now. We've got a conduit where, yes, Mark teaches them how to open or create a business, but at the same time, they are addressing all those essential skills. So they do have to speak in public. They do have to work in a team. They do have to build their own confidence. And they can see that there's an outcome. And they will present their ideas to a Dredelsdale County audience. They know where they're going. And we asked them what they wanted. The day they said that, and we delivered that, or we were desperately trying to deliver that.
Brilliant. Thanks. Do you, anybody else for a question, comment, or comments on what you've heard?
Thank you. Can I stress on a program that Steve and Mark work with? Mark, how much time have you had to commit to this? And how many students are in this group that you are working with?
Am I going? Yeah. You want to kick? So to answer the question directly without waffling or being a politician, when did we start? October? Yes. Yeah, we start October till about May, end of April, beginning of May, something like that. I think we said 14 session. Yeah. So I go in there twice a month, roughly every fortnight or so, for an hour. It's in there, whatever you class the period, isn't it? In the work period. Enrichment hour, whatever it is. So I go in there, and on the alternate weeks, they're doing the homework. Effectively. So we work through a 14-stage process, which teaches them how to run a business. It's what I do when I start a business. So it's real. And then I put some work in the background, creating the program originally. So there's probably 2 or 3 hours spent putting that together. Yeah.
Okay. Other questions? Any observations, comments? Anything anybody wants to add?
That's Kristen, yeah.
Hi, this is just an observation really from the way that the whole CEC and Careers Hotspot works. For example, I'm right down the south of the county, and for example, there is one bus to Lincoln month, Israel 6th, the third Wednesday runs. What all is CEC doing in linking schools that go on county borders with employers that their students can actually access with, for example, beautiful. We've got Peterborough, which is right next to us, but we now have no kind of relationship with the hub there. And if this is going to work, there must be other schools that are in the same situation as us.
It's a really broad question, and thank you for raising it. I'm sort of looking to Lee and Alex in a way to actually help from a local perspective in linking with your bordering careers hubs. I mean, I think that we have a national structure for a reason, so that there is some consistency across the country. Every area is slightly different, but we have a careers hub in every part of the country. So and there are connections between them. So in your specific example, I don't know whether it's Cambridge. Yeah, it's Cambridge and Peterborough. Sorry, you said so. It's obviously a careers hub there. Alex, maybe it's one for you to pair up with them.
If that's an issue that you're finding, then let's go to address it. And if we need to get the careers together with you, then we can certainly get to do that to see what bridges we can make.
It's good. Thank you.
Okay, great. We're going to wrap up there. I just want to thank the panel again for those really interesting insights. So probably there's lots of thoughts in the room coming out that you're probably having those conversations in your own head to add to what they're talking about. But I would like to thank them all. So a round of applause for our contribution.